Hey St. Elmo's Fire. So, Kel, while we miss you, thanks for kicking off a conversation because I want to talk about creativity and the struggles of creativity and the struggles of trying to be a creative person in the world. While I know you felt that there was a lot of creative pulls on you, I actually read a book recently that made me feel a little bit better about my creative process, and I'd like to recommend it to anyone who wants to make things, whether it's videos, writing, photography, acting, whatever it may be that you feel a creative passion to do. I think Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic might be really helpful for you. I picked this up because I had heard of Elizabeth Gilbert before. She's the author who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. So if you're familiar with that book, you'd already be familiar with Elizabeth Gilbert. She's written a whole lot of other things too, both novels and nonfiction. She's written about love and marriage. She's written about spiritual journeys. And this most recent book is all about creativity and her philosophy on creativity, as well as some just practical advice for existing in a creative space. One of the best things that I found about this book is she's very realistic about creativity. There's no call to just throw everything up in the air and go create and be a suffering, starving artist. She basically at one point has an entire chapter dedicated to don't quit your day job. She basically says that it wasn't until Eat, Pray, Love released that she was able to quit and work full time. The entire time she's been writing, and she's been writing since a young age, she's always had a day job, no matter what that may be. And she doesn't even say that you should be, looking to necessarily make a living from your creative works. She talks about a friend of hers who later in life decided to go back to the ice skating that she quit as a child when she realized that she was never going to be a professional ice skater. And she just finally took the plunge and said, hey, I want to do this for me. And that's the one thing I was walking away from this book, is creative endeavors only seem to be worth it when you're doing it for yourself. She has a passage where she talks about a professor who teaches environmental science, and on the first day of class he always asks his students, do you love nature? And every single hand in the room goes up. And he responds with, do you think nature loves you back? And people aren't so sure about that. She kind of points out that it's one of those things where you should probably feel the same way about your writing. You should be confident that your writing or your creative thing that you want to do wants to be made. She kind of views creativity and ideas and that spark of inspiration as almost a living, breathing thing that you get to embrace and journey with through the creative process. She's very realistic that it's not an easy process. The entire time you've got that little voice of fear in the back of your head. And she says that it's almost best that you just embrace the fact that fear is going to be there. The way it gets phrased is, okay, you can come along for the car trip, but you're not allowed to touch the radio, and you're definitely not driving. You're not allowed to navigate, but we'll accept that you're coming along whether we want you to or not. I just found a breath of fresh air in compared to a lot of other kind of creative process, the kind of idea that we need to suffer for our art that just kind of leaches out into the world today. The stories of the people who, do nothing but write all the time, or, the people who feel like they can only really create when they're, have negative, awful things going on in the back of their lives. While that can be a great source of inspiration, it shouldn't be the thing pulling you closer to your work. And the other cool thing about Big Magic, it's a podcast as well. So after you finish the book, go look up the podcast Magic Lessons. I'm a huge podcast fan. I listen to them all the time on the way to work, and I've been doing a lot of traveling lately for wedding stuff. So having a slew of podcasts in the car queued up, ready to go, has been a lifesaver for me. And one of the podcasts I've been listening to is the Big Magic companion podcast, Magic Lessons. Elizabeth basically has called out a few ordinary people who are dealing with different creative struggles, whether it's I want to try something new and I've already been successful in one area and I'm worried that trying something new is going to throw me off altogether. Another person was dealing with getting back into the creative groove after suffering a loss. Someone else is like, my day job is hella boring. Please help me because I still want to create things and I don't want it to steal my soul. So she talks to these people, she gives them some challenges, everything from go find a creative community to work with, to write an essay or a letter from your fear, a letter from your creative muse, and just put on paper all the things you're dealing with. But she also calls in an expert, if you will. Someone else who has dealt with a similar struggle, and this is everything from Neil Gaiman to Michael Ian Black. John Hodgman was on an episode. So these are pretty well-known people who she basically calls up and says, hey, what advice can you give? I've given my piece, but it's always useful to have a second opinion. What do you have to share? And I have taken so much away from these podcasts, and just that little moment of going, okay, this is doable. I can get things done. But sometimes I have to actually say, you know, it's not going to be perfect the first time around, but I'm trying, and I'm putting it out there. I can see a little bit of myself in a lot of the struggles that these other writers are having, so having that kind of perspective and hearing from what people are dealing with has been helpful as well. And I just really appreciated how realistic the book takes things. And if you ever read any of Elizabeth Gilbert's writing, she's very personable. The book is funny. I found myself laughing out loud at some of her metaphors and descriptions of how she feels this stuff works. And it's just an easy read, but I got so much out of it. So, highly recommend Big Magic if you check it out. Or if you've maybe read it already. Let me know. I'd love to hear what you think.